What if we could print a human heart with no donors necessary? Right now, there are over 100,000 Americans on wait lists for organ transplants. But what if we could one day bypass these lists and print organs on demand? Scientists right now are in the process of printing human hearts, lungs, kidneys, and any other organ you can imagine. But when will this technology become available to you? In this video, we'll explore the history of printing organs, how this process works, what challenges face scientists right now, and when this technology might become available to the masses. Let's get into it. The history of organ printing started long before you would initially suspect. Back in the 1980s, when Charles Hull invented something called stereolithography. It's the foundation for 3D printing not only organs, but objects in general. In 1999, Wake Forest was able to successfully 3D print the first organ in the form of a bladder. Unfortunately, that's not going to help their March Madness chances this year. In 2013, bio company Organovo was able to synthesize the first human liver tissue from 3D printing. And in 2019, scientists in Israel were able to produce a rabbit-sized heart that was both functional and well vascularized, something that you will soon learn is very challenging. These breakthroughs have paved the way for a future in which organ printing might become available to us all in our lifetimes, and that is very exciting news. So let's dive into the process of how this all works. To begin to understand how we can actually 3D print an organ, we first need to understand how 3D printing works in general. A traditional 3D printer has an external coating that prevents any light from getting on the inside of the tank. This is very important as the process uses UV light on the inside. A build platform is lowered into a tank of resin, leaving about a layer of liquid that's 100 microns thick, about a fourth of the thickness of a human hair. The build tank has a clear platform that allows a UV laser to selectively harden the resin in the desired shape, layer by layer. This process works from the bottom up until the desired shape is complete. From there, you can take the object out, and a lot of times there'll be different supports that are added that can then be removed. It's also important to note that traditionally, something like an AutoCAD file is imported into the printer so the printer understands what it needs to be building. That was a very expedited explanation of how it all works, but essentially a UV laser selectively hardens very thin layers of liquid resin, solidifying them into a hard plastic, and then working from the bottom up until the desired object is achieved. And so when it comes to printing a human organ, instead of using a liquid resin that would just turn into a hard plastic, you actually extract stem cells, combine that with a base such as collagen or gelatin, and then put in growth factors and vitamins, and that creates something that scientists call a bioink. Once you have the bioink, you load a file with the patient's organ specifications. This is important because every single person is different. It's not like it is in the textbook. Human physiology and anatomy isn't one constant. Everybody's shaped a little bit differently, so getting the proper specifications for printing the organ are crucial. Once you have the bioink and the file, the blueprint for the organ you're printing, the process works very similarly. Working from the bottom up, layer by layer, the 3D printer constructs the organ out of this bioink. And once the organ is built, it is then placed in a bioreactor. If you watched my last video about meat culturing, you'd understand that the bioreactor mimicked the internal conditions of the desired animal, allowing the meat to mature. The same principle applies here. The organ is placed in a bioreactor that mimics the internal human physiological conditions. This allows the cells in the organ to mature and hopefully have a higher success rate. And once the organ has had time to mature in the bioreactor, it's time for the transplant surgery. So right now you might be thinking, this whole process sounds easy enough. Why haven't we started organ printing in hospitals yet? Well, there are three major challenges facing organ printing currently, and those are vascularization, immune rejection, and scaling to human size. Let's start with vascularization. Vascularization is just essentially blood flow and blood vessels. So the human blood vessel system is extremely complex. If you haven't ever seen a picture of the entire adult human vasculature, it is so much more complex and dense than we give it credit for. Not only that, but blood vessels are the major transport system for everything in your body. And so if an organ can't be well vascularized, then you're gonna have tissue necrosis or tissue death. And so the challenge for scientists is being able to 3D print these blood vessels within the organ, especially when it gets into the small crevices and inner workings of these organs. Because even just a small portion of the organ that's not well vascularized will result in a deficient organ. On top of that, the complexion of the blood vessels is extremely complex. You not only have to have the blood vessels strong enough to be able to hold in the blood, but they also have to be able to participate in the exchange of materials. They have to let things cross their membranes both into the blood vessel and out of the blood vessel. And so this is something that scientists have been stumped on as of late. The second challenge has to deal with immune rejection. This is a common issue in current transplant methods from donors. Your immune system has different mechanisms for recognizing self versus non-self. And for a majority of people, these mechanisms work very well. And when your immune system detects something that's non-self, it will attack it with the full might of its immune system. So if the immune system knows that this organ isn't of itself, it's going to begin attacking it. This isn't necessarily as big of a problem for somebody who's using their own stem cells in the growth of a new organ, but in a lot of cases, a patient can't use their own stem cells because their organ's cooked to begin with. So that's another challenge. How do you let the body know that this organ is going to be functioning and is going to help the body rather than hurt it? To make matters worse, outside of the brain, the immune system might be the most complex and least understood system in your entire body. And the final challenge facing scientists right now is scaling these organs up to human size. It's one thing to make a rabbit-sized heart, it's another thing to make a human-sized heart, or a human-sized lung, or kidney, or liver. And so that's another issue that scientists are having to contend with. How do you make something so much bigger than what you've currently been producing and make sure it's vascularized and make sure it's not going to get rejected by the immune system? And so that's something that we got to cheer on our scientists to hopefully be able to figure out soon. Let's start with the good news first. The good news is there would be no more organ shortages. In the United States, an average of 17 people die while waiting on organ transplant lists every day. This equates to roughly 6,200 people every year that would be saved. And this doesn't even include the people that are living lives that are less than optimal because they're living with an organ that's not functioning properly. Death isn't the only metric for poor health. The second positive implication for organ printing has to do with a reduced need for immunosuppressants. As it currently stands, after an organ transplant, a patient is usually prescribed immunosuppressants that weaken the immune system in the hopes that organ rejection will be less likely. The problem with this is with a weakened immune system, you're more susceptible to all kinds of diseases, infections, and even cancer. If you're able to 3D print an organ that's not going to be rejected by the immune system, then you don't need immunosuppressants to weaken the immune system to begin with, and this would be a very good thing. The third and final positive implication I want to include in this video is the concept of personalized medicine. I'm in pharmacy school, and personalized medicine is a growing concept that basically states that because each person is different, each person needs a custom tailored treatment plan outside of what we've already been doing. So for example, let's say someone's taking an ACE inhibitor like lisinopril. Well, those are only offered in certain dosage quantities, and maybe someone's weight and age puts them right in between two dosage quantities. And if they take the one that's lower, they're gonna get a subtherapeutic effect, where maybe if they take the one that's higher, then they're gonna experience a lot more adverse side effects. The concept of personalized medicine is once we get the means to be able to individually tailor dosages and other forms of treatment, then patients will have more of a therapeutic effect without all the side effects. Organ transplants fall into this category. If you can create specifications for each individual person and what their organs look like, then that's just bolstering personalized medicine, which improves the longevity and quality of life. But once again, we can't recognize the good without mentioning the potential bad that's going to come with organ printing. I can think of two things off the top of my head that could be very negative when it comes to organ printing. The first one being a black market. Now, this sounds really dumb, but the black market for organ and organ harvesting is already very real. Now, imagine a situation where organ harvesting doesn't exist, but almost anyone can print an organ with a 3D printer and the necessary means and the patient's stem cells. This could lead to a lot of malpractice because if somebody can't afford traditional organ transplant surgery from printing, whether that be due to costs or insurance covering it, then they're going to turn elsewhere. And you could see a lot more black market practice when it comes to the organ industry. The second concern I'd like to raise is the potential exploitation of this technology. If it's possible to grow organs, what else is it possible to do? What other modifications could you make to the human body? And will people try to take advantage of this system? And that's something we need to be on the lookout for, because if history has taught us anything, it's that people will try to exploit a good technology for nefarious purposes. So the bottom line, and what you've all been wondering, when will this technology become available? Well, it depends on the organ, but generally speaking, between 10 and 30 years from now, it should be possible to be able to 3D print organs, with less complex organs like the kidneys and the liver being closer to 10 years, and more complex organs like the heart taking 30 years. Now, this doesn't mean if you're like 15 years old and you're probably gonna live to 2050 to just trash your organs, because nothing's guaranteed. But in theory, a young person now will probably be able to get all of their organs replaced should they need that through artificial means and printing, which is a very exciting prospect. But let me know what you think. Are you excited for this, or do you think it's just going to cause people to be less accountable? I'm curious. And once again, thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something today.